Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Objects 9 for Part 4 of Module 1, and we've got three problems dealing with objects again. So we're going to write a function called getOddLengthWords@Property. If you've been following along with the object questions, you understand that first we're going to check the edge cases, then we're going to create a new array, then we're going to iterate over the words in the array within the object, check to see which of those have lengths that are odd. If they do, push it into the result array and then return it. So if you want a more in-depth description of how to do the edge cases or how we came about that, you can look at a couple of the previous object exercises. But for our purposes, we're going to just get right into the code. So the first one, object.key, needs to, well, basically not be equal to undefined. If it is equal to undefined, then the question doesn't really make sense. So we're going to return an empty array. The next one is going to be checking to make sure that the property, which we've just determined is defined, is itself an array. So if array.isArray applied to the object at the given key returns false, then we know we don't have an array, and we can just return an empty array. If the array is empty, it should return an empty array. I would prefer that that's about to happen, regardless of whatever we do, so we don't need anything for that. We'll say variable result is equal to an empty array, and the same thing. If it contains no odd length element, should return an empty array. We're only going to be adding elements to this result array in the event that they are odd length elements. So we're not going to really need to worry about that edge case either. Last thing we do is return the result. We're going to iterate over the input array, which is located inside of an object. So it'll be I is less than object at key dot length I plus plus. And then here we want to check. It might behoove us to check to see if they are actually strings, although I would suggest that we don't need to because there doesn't seem to be any other elements besides strings in here. If we get an error, we'll just kind of remember that, hey, we're assuming here that they're all strings. In fact, that's actually a great place for a comment. We'll say, assume all elements are strings. That way, if a problem happens, we can come back to line 11 and be like, oh, we are assuming that all elements are strings, so we might need to adjust that. So, assuming that all elements are strings, we're going to need to get the length of the current element. So the current element is object at key at I. So that's a string inside of this array. We want to check to see if the length, when we modulo it by 2, is equal to 1. Some value modulo 2 is equal to 1 means that that value is odd. And that's what we're looking for. So if that's the case, we're going to push into the result object at key at I. And then finally return the result. Excellent work. Now we're going to get the average of elements at property. So a couple edge cases to sort out here first. If object at key is equal to undefined, then we want to, what's it say, return 0. Since average involves dividing something by the length, we are going to check to make sure that if the array at the given key is empty, it should return 0. That is going to be part of our edge cases this time. It hasn't been in some of the previous ones we've done, but it will be for this one. So the next one is where we apply array.isArray to object.key. Check to see if that's equal to false. In the event that it is, the problem can be sorted out rather quickly by just returning 0. And lastly, if object at key dot length is equal to 0, we know we have an empty array inputted. And in that case, we want to return 0. Now in the previous problems for averages, we create a sum, set it equal to 0, iterate over the array in question. So it's going to be I is less than object at key dot length, and then increment I each time. Why do you always use I? I just do. Somebody showed it to me one time as I, and I do it. If you have a nested array, or if you have a nested for loop where you have a for loop inside of another for loop, typically it goes I and then J, but what you actually call this is completely immaterial, provided that you name it consistently. So, iterating over the elements, we're going to say sum plus equals, and we want to add the current element. So object.key accesses the array. At I is going to access an individual element, which we're assuming are all numbers. And then we'll return sum divided by object at key, which is the array in question, dot length. And we're in good shape. Even length words is almost the exact same thing as the first problem. So I'm going to go up and grab a couple of the edge cases. Again, I would highly suggest that you write these out. Practice with the if statements and moving to the next line and correcting errors that you make you move faster during the interview, so I would highly suggest doing it. Variable result is equal to an empty array. We will return the result at the end. Then we've got a for loop. I is going to need to remain less than the object at the key dot length. I is going to increment each time. And we're going to check to see if the current value, which is object at key at I, we're going to assume that this is now a string, dot length, modulo 2 needs to be equivalent to 0, which would mean that the length is even. In the event that that is the case, we're going to push to the result the object at the key at I. And then finally return the result. And that's it. Excellent work, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.